I bought a $17 million house, only to find out my mother-in-law was scheming to claim it for herself and her entire family. The day I closed on the estate, I felt like every long night and every risk I had taken in my career had finally led me here. The gates opened to a winding driveway lined with olive trees, and at the end sat a house that looked like it had been pulled from a magazine. Wide glass windows reflected the California sun, and terraces stretched out toward a pool that seemed to spill into the horizon. It wasn't just a house. It was the dream I had built with my own hands. Grant stood beside me, arm around my shoulders, telling me how proud he was. He knew the years I had poured into my design firm, the sacrifices that came with building something from scratch, and he had always been my biggest cheerleader. Walking through those rooms with him, I felt like life had finally evened out, like all the work had been worth it. That feeling didn't last long. Lydia arrived the very next day. She walked through the grand entrance without even pausing to admire it, her sharp eyes scanning the vaulted ceilings and marble floors as though she were appraising them. She let out a dry laugh and said, "All this space for just the two of you? Seems a bit much, don't you think?" Her words hit harder than I expected. I brushed them off with a polite smile, telling myself she probably just felt overwhelmed. Families have their quirks, and I had always known Lydia to have a biting tongue. Still, the way she ran her fingers along the staircase banister, commenting on how it would be perfect for children running up and down, left me with a heaviness in my chest. Later that evening, Grant tried to soothe me. "She doesn't mean anything by it," he said, squeezing my hand as we sat in the massive living room that still smelled of fresh paint and new beginnings. "She's just, well, she's always like that." I nodded, forcing myself to believe him. After all, it was easier to think of it as harmless than to let suspicion grow. But as I lay in bed that night, staring at the dark ceiling above me, I couldn't shake the unease. There was something in Lydia's tone that lingered, like a shadow stretching longer than it should. She hadn't sounded like someone making an offhand comment. She had sounded like someone planting a seed. I told myself I was being dramatic. I told myself every family had its tensions, and this was just another one of those moments I'd learned to live with. And so I buried that uncomfortable feeling deep down, convincing myself that it was nothing more than nerves. After all, I had everything I had ever wanted. Or so I thought. It started slowly, in little ways that didn't seem dangerous at first. Lydia began dropping by without calling, always with someone new in tow. Sometimes it was a cousin, other times a niece or nephew I had never met before. She would walk them through the house like a tour guide, her heels clicking across the floors as she pointed out rooms and hallways. "This is where Grant will raise a family," she would say with a smile, never once looking at me, as if I were invisible in my own home. The first few times, I tried to be polite. I offered drinks, snacks, made small talk. But each visit left me feeling like a guest in the place I had bought with my own money. She spoke about the house as though it belonged only to her son, and each time she said Grant's house, I felt a sting in my chest. Grant never corrected her. He'd just laugh it off, as though words had no weight. It grew harder to stay calm when she brought entire groups. Once she arrived with 3 children running wild through the halls, dragging their hands along the walls, bouncing on the furniture. "They just love seeing where their Uncle Grant lives," Lydia said proudly, as if their mess was a compliment. I stood in the doorway, smiling tightly, my nails digging into my palms. It wasn't a home tour anymore. It felt like a rehearsal for something else. Dinner became no easier. One night we were all seated around the long dining table, candles lit, plates filled, when Lydia leaned back in her chair and announced her latest idea. "That guest house out back could be renovated," she said casually, sipping her wine. "It would be perfect for my sister's family. They've been looking for a new place, and it would keep everyone close together." The words landed like a stone in my stomach. I glanced at Grant, waiting for him to laugh, to tell her she was being ridiculous. But he only shifted uncomfortably, avoiding my eyes. I forced a smile, asked Lydia why she thought that would be appropriate, but she brushed me off with a wave of her hand. "Oh, you'll see. It makes sense. Families should be together." I pushed my food around my plate, listening as she talked about paint colors, extra bathrooms, even where the children could play. The longer she spoke, the more her vision took shape, as if she had been planning it for weeks. I felt my throat tighten, but I stayed quiet, unwilling to start a fight at the table. Later that night, when the house was finally empty, I sat in the darkened living room, the echo of her words circling in my head. Renovating the guest house. Moving her family in. It wasn't just talk anymore. Lydia wasn't just visiting. She was carving out space piece by piece, as if she believed this home was already hers. And for the first time, I couldn't shake the thought that she had much bigger plans. One night the house was quiet, the kind of stillness that feels heavy after a long day. I stepped outside to breathe in the cool air and clear my head. The garden stretched out under soft lights, and that's when I heard Lydia's voice. She was tucked near the hedge, her phone pressed close, speaking low but sharp. At first, I thought she was just gossiping, but then her words froze me in place. "Don't worry," she said, her tone almost triumphant. "Once we're settled in here, everyone will have their own space. Callie won't be able to stop it." I stood there, hidden in the shadows, my heart hammering. Settled in here. Everyone will have their own space. It hit me all at once. This wasn't casual talk or daydream. She had a plan. She wasn't just parading relatives through the house for fun. She meant to bring them here, to move them in, as if this estate had been waiting for her whole family. My stomach twisted. I gripped the edge of the patio railing so tightly my fingers ached. How long had she been plotting this? How many of those innocent visits had been part of her scheme? Suddenly, every offhand comment, every suggestion about the guest house, every smug smile made sense. She wasn't hinting, she was preparing. I wanted to storm over, snatch the phone from her hand, and demand answers. But fear held me back. What if I confronted her and she twisted it, made me look paranoid? Worse, what if I told Grant and he didn't believe me? He'd already brushed off her comments before. If I told him I overheard his mother saying those words, would he defend me, or would he choose her? The thought made my chest ache. I replayed her sentence over and over. Callie won't be able to stop it. The certainty in her voice cut deeper than any insult she had ever thrown my way. She truly believed she could push me aside in my own home. I crept back inside, careful not to make a sound. The house suddenly felt colder, the walls too wide, the silence too loud. I sat at the edge of the couch, staring at the dark window, torn between anger and fear. If I stayed quiet, she would keep pressing forward. If I spoke up, I risked losing Grant's trust. That night I barely slept, lying awake with her words circling in my head. The garden outside seemed darker than usual, almost watching me. I realized then that this wasn't just about rude visits or casual comments. Lydia had already drawn a line, and I was on the wrong side of it. I couldn't hold it in any longer. The weight of what I'd heard in the garden pressed down on me until I finally sat Grant down in the living room. The night was quiet, the kind of stillness that makes every word sound sharper than it should. I told him exactly what I had heard, his mother's voice in the garden, the promise that everyone would have their own space, and the part that hurt the most, that I wouldn't be able to stop it. Grant leaned back, rubbing his face, then gave me a look that felt more tired than shocked. "That's just Mom exaggerating," he said with a shrug. "You know how she gets." The words stung. I waited for him to ask more, to show even a little concern, but he didn't. He brushed it off like it was nothing, like I was overreacting. I felt heat rise in my chest. This wasn't just a careless comment from his mother. It was a plan, a threat, but he acted as though it was harmless chatter. "Exaggerating?" I asked, my voice breaking. "She's talking about moving her family into our home. Doesn't that bother you at all?" He sighed, reaching for my hand, but his touch felt hollow. "You're reading too much into it. She just likes to talk big. She doesn't mean half the things she says." That night, I felt more alone than ever. It wasn't just Lydia's words anymore. It was the way Grant chose to ignore them. For the first time, I wondered if he truly saw me as his partner or if, in his mind, his mother's wishes always came first. Over the next few weeks, little signs began to show. Furniture I hadn't ordered arrived at the house. A large oak dining table, a set of couches, even drapes that clashed with the ones I had chosen. Each time, Grant explained that his mother thought they would fit better and had gone ahead with the order. He said it casually, as though it were a small favor. But to me, it was another message. Decisions were being made without me, about the home I had worked so hard to buy. I would walk through the rooms and see pieces of Lydia's taste settling into the space, pushing out mine. Each new item felt like an intrusion, proof that she was inching her way deeper into our lives. I tried to talk to Grant again, tried to make him see how this was slowly erasing me from my own home. But his answers never changed. "She's just trying to help. It's not a big deal. Don't take it so personally." I stopped arguing after a while, but inside, the anger and hurt only grew. Lydia had crossed a line, but what cut deeper was realizing my husband wasn't standing beside me. Instead, he was quietly letting her take over, one decision at a time. It was a Saturday morning when I first saw the truck outside the gate. At first, I thought maybe Grant had ordered something else without telling me, another surprise from his mother's suggestion. But when the movers began unloading large boxes onto the driveway, I knew something was wrong. I stepped outside, trying to stay calm. Lydia stood there with her usual smile, directing the men as though she owned the place. "Don't worry, Callie," she said when she noticed me. "We're just storing a few things here for a little while. No trouble at all." Her words were smooth, but the scene in front of me told a different story. This wasn't a few things. Mattresses were being carried inside, along with dressers and bins stacked high. I watched as a box labeled kids' clothes was set on the porch, and the knot in my stomach grew tighter. I followed her inside, my voice sharp now. "What is all this?" Who are these for? She didn't even pause. For my sister's family. They've been going through a rough patch, and there's plenty of space here. It just makes sense. She said it so matter-of-factly, as though she didn't need my permission. I felt my chest tighten with rage. You can't just move people into my home, I said, my voice shaking. This isn't your decision. That's when her smile disappeared. Her face hardened, and her words came out like knives. This house is for my son's family, not yours. The silence that followed was louder than anything I had ever heard. For a moment, I couldn't even breathe. She hadn't slipped or misspoken. She meant every word. To her, I wasn't part of this family. I was an outsider standing in the way of what she believed was rightfully. The movers hesitated, glancing between us, unsure of what to do. My anger boiled over. Get everything back on that truck. Now. Nothing stays here. My voice shook, but I meant every word. Lydia's eyes narrowed. You're being dramatic. Grant will understand. He knows this is what's best. That cut even deeper. She was so sure of him, so confident that her son would back her up, no matter how outrageous her behavior became. For the first time, I felt the ground beneath me shift. This wasn't just a battle over furniture or space. This was about belonging, about who truly had a place in this family, and in this home. I stood my ground, watching as the movers slowly carried the boxes back outside. Lydia muttered under her breath the whole time, calling me selfish, ungrateful, and worse. But none of it stung as much as the truth I had just learned. In her eyes, I had never been part of the family at all. One afternoon, I was in the study sorting through bills and mail when I noticed an unfamiliar folder tucked between envelopes. It had been left carelessly on the desk, the kind of thing someone didn't mean for me to see. I opened it, and what I found made my stomach twist. Inside were legal documents, already filled out, with my address printed across the top. The papers weren't about repairs or taxes, they were about the deed to the house. The forms showed everything being shifted into Grant's name only. My name, the one I had signed proudly when I bought the estate, was nowhere. At the bottom, there were notes scribbled in Lydia's handwriting, along with the business card of a lawyer I had never heard of. The details looked rushed, messy, almost secretive, but one thing was clear. She was trying to erase me from my own home. I sat frozen, staring at the papers until the letters blurred. My hands shook as I carried them into the living room, where Grant was flipping through a magazine like it was any other day. I dropped the folder on the coffee table, my voice tight. Explain this. He glanced at the documents, and instead of looking shocked, his face fell in a guilty way that told me he already knew. He ran a hand through his hair, sighing heavily. Mom just thinks it's safer this way. To protect the family. The words made my chest ache. Protect the family? Protect who? This house is mine. I bought it. I paid for it. Why would she even think this is okay? Grant avoided my eyes. She worries about the future. About what happens if things go wrong. She just wants security. I felt the floor tilt beneath me. It wasn't just Lydia sneaking behind my back. Grant had let her. He hadn't stopped her, hadn't defended me, hadn't even warned me. All those times I had trusted him to choose us, to put our marriage first, he had quietly chosen her instead. You were going to let this happen, I whispered, my throat burning. You were going to let her take everything I built. He finally looked at me then, his eyes tired, almost pleading. It's not like that. I didn't sign anything. I was just considering it. But the damage was already done. Considering it meant he had thought about it, weighed my place against hers, and I had lost. The man I had trusted with my life, the partner I had believed would always stand beside me, had betrayed me in the worst way. I turned away, holding the papers against my chest as though they were a knife I needed to keep from cutting me deeper. In that moment, I knew something had broken that couldn't be fixed. My marriage wasn't what I thought it was. My home wasn't safe. And the person I loved most had quietly been standing on the other side all along. I took a deep breath and told myself I wasn't going to lose control. Instead of letting anger take over, I focused on protecting myself. I started thinking clearly, planning carefully, and making sure I had everything I needed to stay safe and strong. I knew that if I stayed calm, I could turn the situation around without anyone realizing. The first thing I did was call my attorney. I explained everything in detail and made sure they understood my side completely. I asked them to gather all the documents showing that I alone had paid for the house. Every bill, every receipt, every record I had, I made sure it was organized and ready. I wanted to make sure there was no way anyone could claim otherwise. It felt empowering to know that I had solid proof on my side, and it gave me a quiet confidence that I hadn't felt in a long time. While that was happening, I started quietly preparing the divorce papers. I didn't tell Grant or anyone else what I was doing. I didn't want anyone to know what was coming. I took my time, making sure everything was precise and accurate. Every word mattered, and I made sure nothing could be twisted or challenged. Doing this work in secret gave me a sense of control I hadn't had before. I wasn't rushing. I wasn't panicking. I was just steadily making my way toward the outcome I wanted. At the same time, I decided not to interfere with Lydia and Grant. I knew they were already digging their own grave with the choices they were making. I didn't need to rush or push. I just needed to stay ready and wait. It was strange, but I felt almost like a predator, quietly watching, waiting for the right moment. I wasn't cruel. I was careful, strategic, and patient. Letting them make mistakes on their own made my plan stronger. I focused on staying calm and steady every day. I reminded myself that this was my life, my home, my future, and I deserved to protect it. I kept all my actions private, making sure no one could predict what I was doing. Every phone call, every document, every small step I took was part of building my security. I felt a sense of clarity that I hadn't felt before, like the fog of chaos had finally lifted. Even when I saw Grant or Lydia, I stayed composed. I smiled politely, said the right things, and kept my true feelings hidden. No one could see what I was planning, and that made me stronger. I knew that when the time came, I would have everything in place. I would have the proof, the papers, and the patience to see my plan through. I felt a quiet satisfaction in knowing I wasn't acting out of anger or revenge, but out of careful preparation. I was protecting myself, securing my future, and letting events unfold exactly as they should. I wasn't rushing, I wasn't losing control, and most importantly, I was ready for whatever came next. I was waiting quietly when Lydia arrived, dragging her entire family with her, looking confident and sure they could take over my home. I didn't flinch or say a word at first. I let them think they were in control for a moment, just to see how far they would push. When Lydia started talking about moving in, I stepped forward calmly and held up the legal deed. I looked her straight in the eyes and said clearly, "This house is mine, and mine alone." My voice didn't shake, and I made sure everyone there could hear me. I could feel the tension rise in the room as the words sank in. Lydia gasped and shrieked, insisting that Grant had rights too. She tried to make it sound like they were entitled to everything, but I stayed calm. I had already prepared for this moment. I told them both that Grant had signed a prenuptial agreement years ago, and that agreement protected me and this house. I watched their faces change as reality started to hit. I didn't yell or beg, I just spoke with certainty. I made it impossible for them to argue without looking foolish. I wanted everyone there to see the truth for themselves, and I wanted to feel the power of standing up for what was rightfully mine. Every eye in the room was on me, and I didn't flinch under the attention. I told them to get out. I said it firmly, without hesitation. I didn't wait for them to argue or negotiate. I just gave them the facts and the instruction. The silence afterward was almost loud. Nobody moved at first, like they couldn't believe what was happening. I held my ground, showing that I wouldn't back down. Lydia tried to protest, but I ignored her. I didn't argue. I didn't explain further. I just stayed strong and let the legal proof speak for itself. Grant looked uncomfortable, shifting his weight, and I knew he realized there was no way around it. The prenuptial agreement was clear, and the deed was clear. There was nothing they could do. I felt a strange mix of relief and satisfaction as they started to leave. It wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about standing firm and protecting what I had worked for. I didn't gloat, I didn't celebrate loudly, but inside, I felt a quiet victory. I had prepared carefully, stayed calm, and now the outcome was exactly what I wanted. Once they were gone, I walked through my house, taking in every room. Everything felt secure and mine. I had faced the challenge without losing control, without anger dictating my actions. The house was safe, and I was in control. I could finally breathe, knowing that I had handled the showdown with strength and intelligence, and that nothing could take this away from me. Grant came to me, his face full of worry, and he started begging. He said he was just trying to keep the peace, like that could explain everything he had done. I looked at him carefully, noticing every word, every hesitation. I could feel the weight of all the lies and betrayals behind his excuses. I didn't answer him with anger, but I didn't forgive him either. I said calmly, "Peace doesn't mean betrayal." I wanted him to understand that what he had done wasn't just a mistake, it was a choice, and it had consequences. I could see him trying to find the right words, but I didn't let him off the hook. I had already made my decision, and it wasn't going to change. Lydia, of course, couldn't handle it quietly. She started screaming, yelling at everyone in sight, and making a scene. I stayed calm, watching as movers carried her belongings back out of the house. She stomped, she shouted, and she tried to make everyone feel sorry for her, but no one joined her. I could feel a strange sense of calm as I watched her leave, knowing that her chaos no longer belonged in my life. I felt a clear sense of closure as the last of their things were taken away. The house was quiet again, and it felt like it was finally mine. I could walk through the rooms without fear or tension, without pretending or hiding. Every step I took reminded me that I had regained control, that I had stood firm, and that I had protected what was mine. I went straight to my attorney and filed for divorce. I wanted everything finalized, everything official, so there could be no confusion, no future arguments, and no lingering control from Grant or Lydia. It was a clean break, exactly what I needed. I wasn't just cutting ties with Grant. I was cutting ties with the entire Whitmore family. They had caused too much pain, too much chaos, and I knew I couldn't allow them back into my life in it. After the paperwork was filed, I felt lighter. It was like a weight had been lifted off my shoulders. I didn't have to live in fear, or pretend to be happy, or deal with their lies anymore. My life, my house, my future, it was all mine again. I could make plans without worrying about interference or betrayal. Even though the whole situation had been exhausting, I realized that staying calm, planning carefully, and standing firm had worked. I didn't need revenge. I didn't need to shout or fight. I just needed to protect myself, take action, and keep my boundaries clear. As I closed the last file and walked through the empty halls, I felt a deep sense of peace, real peace this time. I had taken control, I had defended myself, and I had ended the chaos. The Whitmores were gone, the house was mine, and I was free to start over on my own terms. Months had passed since everything with Grant and Lydia ended, and life had finally settled into a peaceful rhythm. My house, my dream home, felt like a real sanctuary now. Every room, every corner, carried a sense of calm I hadn't felt in years. I could move freely, decorate as I wanted, and breathe without worry. It was quiet, but it was the kind of quiet that felt like safety and freedom wrapped together. I poured myself into my work, focusing on my career in a way I never had before. Without distractions or chaos, I found myself growing stronger, smarter, and more confident. I learned to enjoy my independence, to appreciate the fact that I didn't need anyone else to define me or validate my life. I had always worked hard, but now I worked with a sense of purpose and clarity that made every achievement feel even sweeter. I often found myself reflecting on what had happened. Betrayal had come from the people I thought I could trust the most. That sting didn't disappear completely, but it no longer controlled me. Instead, it taught me a lesson about strength, patience, and the importance of staying calm under pressure. I realized that revenge, when planned carefully and executed with composure, had a power that anger alone could never match. It was satisfying in a quiet, controlled way that made me feel capable and in charge of my own life. I also noticed how much I had changed during this time. I wasn't the same person who had felt cornered and helpless months ago. I was stronger, sharper, and more self-assured. I could face challenges without panic, and I could make decisions that truly protected me. That sense of inner strength was one of the most rewarding parts of this victory. It wasn't loud or flashy, but it was real, and it was mine. Evenings became my favorite part of the day. I loved walking through my estate as the sun began to set, watching the golden light stretch across the gardens and windows. The house felt alive with possibility, not just as a building, but as a symbol of everything I had fought to protect. Every step I took through the halls reminded me that this place belonged to me and me alone. I smiled quietly to myself, feeling a sense of contentment that had been impossible before. I didn't need anyone else to claim it or approve of it. I had earned it through patience, planning, and steady determination. The house, my work, my independence, it all belonged to me now. As the sun dipped lower in the sky, casting warm colors across the estate, I felt a deep sense of satisfaction. This was my life, my home, my victory. Everything I had been through, every betrayal and challenge, had led me to this moment. I walked slowly, deliberately, savoring the feeling that at last, everything was exactly as it should be. The house, the peace, the future. It was all mine, completely and undeniably mine. What do you think about Callie's decision to cut ties and take control of her life? Was she right to stay firm, or should she have forgiven? Share your thoughts below, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories.